The title of my message is More Different Good. More Different Good. Just using all my grammar skills on this particular slide. More Different Good. I wonder if you have ever had the experience where, you were talking to somebody about a problem or an issue or something they were going through, and you told them something, and then they went away and did nothing with it, and then someone else told them the same thing, and then they came back and thought that other person was a genius, and then you got mad. Has that happened to anyone else besides me before? Right? Yeah. I think it happens to a lot of us. Specifically, maybe it was a coworker, or maybe it was a friend that you've been talking to about something. If you have kids, you have definitely been through this, right? Where you talk to your kids about something, and they're not listening to you, they're not getting it, and then they go away, and they talk to somebody else, and they come back, and you're like, oh, you know whose mom is a genius? And you're like, is she? We've been saying the same thing, okay, for years, literally for years, right? And this happened to me recently with one of my kids. Both my sons play soccer, and my oldest son's on this travel team, and so he got back from practice a couple weeks ago. And he came in and my wife was like, he did so good at practice tonight. He was passing, and he was just like attentive to everything, and he was just really going for it. And I was like, man, that's awesome. Like, great job. Like, what sparked it for you? What was the thing where you were like, man, I'm going to go for it? And he was like, well, halfway through the practice, the coach, he got us all around. And he told us to take a knee. That means kneel down. I was like, I'm aware. Okay. And he's like, and he was telling us, hey, listen, guys, it's not just about you. It's about the team, okay? You made a commitment to these other players that you were going to show up, even if you're sick, even if you're not feeling great, even if your foot hurts a little bit, even if you're like bummed because you're not scoring or playing well. You got to show up and give your best because it's about the team. We're a part of something here. And so no skipping practices, no playing halfway. This is your team, and this is what it is to be a player, be a part of a team, and ultimately what it is to be a man. And I was like, wow, that's a great speech, right? And he was like, and it got me. And I was like, I'm going to do this. And then he goes, Dad, our coach he's so smart. And I was like, I mean, he's not that smart. You know what I mean? Like, listen, nothing against this guy, but like, I've said this 100 times. Like, I've literally given you this dad talk. And when he says it, he's brilliant, right? But when I say it, you take your shin guards and try to throw them on the roof of the house and run down the street and tell everybody that you're not coming to practice today. And that just seems like I don't deserve that response, because we've talked about this. Like, I'm just as smart. Listen, I didn't say any of that. I just thought it in my own heart, And I was annoyed in the moment, and I didn't approach him with it. I just let him go and take a shower, and then I just said that to my wife, and then she was like, let it go. It's great. He needs that other influence in his life. And I'm like, maybe. And I just tried to sleep it off. And then the next morning, of course, I doubled back, and he had long forgotten that it happened. I was like, hey, remember yesterday when you said with the coach, and he was real smart and all that, and like I feel like we have talked about that, and he was like, oh, I guess maybe we might have, and I'm thinking maybe we might. It's so cute, because we definitely have, okay? We have a lot of times, okay? We've covered this more times than I care to talk, like, but that's cool, like what's the deal with him, and he's like, well, it's just when he did it, like, it's just different, okay? It's just different, and but it's different good. Dad, he's more different good than you. And I was like, you know what? That is hurtful on a lot of levels. First of all, we need to talk about your grammar. But like also, like, yeah, I don't know if you've had these moments before where you've had this interaction with someone and you are torn. Like, emotionally, it is confusing, because on one hand, you're kind of like, this is great. Like, it's relieving, but it's also kind of annoying. It's great because it's like, oh, they finally figured it out, or they finally woke up to what's really happening, or they're seeing it from a different angle, or they finally found their motivation, or finally decided that they're going to kick it into gear and do this thing. But it's like, what was wrong with the way that I was telling you, right? What was wrong with the conversation we had, with the way that the examples I gave, the illustrations that I put out? Like, how come that wasn't good enough? Like, why, right? Why was it suddenly that it happened? Like, with them doing it. And it's like, well, it's just different. It's just different good. It's more different good. That's the way it is. And we can find ourselves being frustrated about this. And maybe you've had this in your life. Like, maybe you've been having a conversation with your spouse or your partner, and it's just like they're not getting it, they're not changing, it's just stuck, and you just back off, and then they come home from being away, and they're like, you know what, I need to be more engaged with the family. I really just need to lean in, and I had the best conversation, and you're like, oh, yeah, he's a genius, true. It's great. And you guys were drinking at the time? So that's clearly, he's a great influence. That's awesome. I've literally been telling you this for 30 years, right? Like, and you feel frustrated, but I also happy and excited. And we wonder, like, why aren't my attempts and my interactions, how come those weren't good enough? Because we could have already figured this out. We could have already done this. We could have already been here. But the reality of it is, different people arrive at truth differently. This is a fact of the way that people work. And the more complex the truth, or the more deeply ingrained it is in the person, the more true the statement is. In some ways, we think like, man, it'd be so much easier. Life would be so much more convenient if everyone responded the same way to the same things. But they don't. Because that's not the way people are designed, which makes solving the same problems for different people very difficult. Makes it nuanced. And the reality is, a diverse problem requires a diverse solution. And I bring this up when we're talking about this idea of loving where you live, because what problem could be more diverse, more layered, more complicated and elaborate than this mission that we're all on to try and give the gospel or connect people to the gospel everywhere, right? That's a huge thing, like connecting everyone everywhere to the message of Christ and then partnering with him to restore all things. Because this is really what he set out to do. Not just try and like save us so that he could rescue us and so that we could escape here later, but literally he talks about wanting to restore all of creation, to partner with his followers, with all of humanity in order to restore creation. All things. You cannot get much bigger of a problem than the restoration of all things because of the phrase, all things, right? There's nothing bigger than all things because it's all things, okay? From the Hebrew, all things, okay? It's all the same, like that's as big as it gets. And so how do we tackle that? How do we figure out how to do that? Because maybe you have these moments where you look around your life, you look around your community, you look in your own backyard, you look around the world and you just think it's too much. There's so much stuff. How are we going to do it? How are we supposed to partner and restore all of this? It just feels like it can't be done. What is the solution? And I want to answer this by just really pointing out what Jesus did, because he's faced with the same complex problem. And I want us to examine like his solution. And we're going to do this by looking at a passage in the book of Luke, chapter 6, starting in verse 12. If you have your Bibles, you can turn there. And if not, you can just pantomime it just for fun, for the people behind you, right? And if you have an I Said Yes Bible that you got here, we put a page number up there, so it's really easy to find in the Bible that you have. And this is what it says. It says in verse 12, one day, soon afterward, after what, right? After Jesus has this realization of the grandiose nature of his mission, of how much has to be done, of like how the dire straits that the world is in and how much saving that they need, and it's overwhelming. And so he responds one day soon afterward by going up on a mountain to pray, and he prayed to God all night. Verse 13, at daybreak he called together all his disciples and chose 12 of them to be apostles. Here are their names. Simon, whom he named Peter. Like, I don't like that name. Let's switch it up, right? Andrew, Peter's brother. James, John, Philip, Bartholomew. It's JP named a cat after, called Bartholomew. Christmas Eve. Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, multiple Jameses. Simon, who was called the Zealot. James, Judas, son of James. Judas Iscariot, who later betrayed him. What a horrible thing to have written after your name in a history book. Like, just, this is you, and also the worst thing you ever did. Let's put that in parentheses for all of time, so just everyone remembers how horrible you were, right? I did some good stuff too. I was nice to my sister a few times. Like, we're not going to put that in there. So Jesus, he's in a moment where he's extremely aware of the enormous challenges in front of him, which is stressful, and his immediate response is he prays, and then he gathers his disciples and gets to work. He prays, and then he looks for people to partner with in order to accomplish something. He prays, and then he finds partners. And honestly, that's a big part of what prayer does. Prayer prepares you to partner with other people. You guys have no idea how many times I had to rehearse that to just not trip over all the P's. There's so many P's happening in that little phrase. Prayer, we got it once for the podcast, but like I'm trying to get, prayer prepares you to partner with people in a patch of pickled peppers with the help of Peter, right? So that's what this is about. And I think you know what I'm talking about. You ever decided that you wanted to do something and you were going to partner with other people to make it happen, and you got started and you're like, not these people. These are horrible people. I can't. They're crazy. They have the weird ideas. I don't like them. She's mean. I can't do this. And you start getting all worked up and you're getting frustrated, and you got to step away so that you can just get a hold of yourself, right? You got to step away from maybe you step outside the room, or maybe you have to walk down the hall, or maybe you got to go sit in your car a minute. This is why you started vaping, right? You had to get a minute away. Because these people, it's just too much. And maybe like Jesus, you're like, I need a couple days. I just need 40 days to pray and just get it all pulled back together. And you leave the group of people that you're supposed to be working with, and you're like, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. You got to help me. Okay, these people are driving me crazy. There's so much stress. They're supposed to be helping. They're making it worse. I feel like I could do better on my own. Okay, I'm going to strangle them. You know who it is too. You know the ones. I'm going to punch them, right? And God's like, they're 12. And you're like, it's going to do it. That's why I got to pray right now. You got to help me. And there's something about that exchange that has this calming effect, or at least it did on the life of Jesus. And it gets you to a place where you can refocus yourself in the presence of God and come back and re-engage. And you need this. Even Jesus needed this. And what I think is interesting about it is every time in Scripture that Jesus went away to pray, when he comes back, he instantly rallies people to go help other people. That was the product. That was what prayer was creating. Not just a feel-good feeling in himself, not just a calm or centeredness in his own self, but this desire to say, man, now that I've been prepared through prayer, I can go back and partner with these people to accomplish something that will really matter. That's going to be purposeful. That's going to make a difference. Beforehand, I was going to kill him, but now I feel like I've had this experience with God where I can come back in and I can work with them to do something that's bigger than all of us. He does this after he comes back. Now, beforehand, because Jesus is human, just like us, right? He has these moments where he's tired and he's worn out and he's exhausted and he is just he's anxious, he's overwhelmed, because this is what the stress of life does to people. But there's something about prayer when we actually slow down and surrender to it that enables us to calm down, that enables us to get a grip on what's really going on, that enables us to shift our perspective and rearrange our priorities once again and go back and re-engage. Because prayer is less about getting God to see things like you and more about God helping you see others like him. And if we really understood that this is the way in which prayer is most powerful in our lives, I wonder if it would revolutionize your day-to-day life. Because most of us, we see prayer as no, I got to get in there and I got to tell God what he needs to know, okay? And you got to fix some stuff. You got to do some stuff different. I don't know why you're trying to send these people to me. They're no help at all, okay? I can't work in this kind of environment. I need more resources. If you go back way Old Testament with David, his response was God, you got to kill some of these people, okay? I can't deal with them. You need to do away with them, right? And sometimes we approach prayer with this list of things we need God to do or understand, as opposed to just slowing down and surrendering to God in the moment and allowing God to change the way that we see the people around us, to see them through his eyes. And to realize wait, there's actually a depth to you. There's actually a story to your past and to your personality. There's actually things that you bring to the table that I don't, and we're going to be better together because of it. This is the purpose in prayer. And so Jesus prays, and then he assembles all these super different people and he gets to work. And I think this is fascinating that this is his action plan because, especially in our culture, we want to prove that we're independent, right? That we can fix it and do it and remedy it and solve it on our own. But Jesus, who is God in human form, he doesn't do that. He looks at the situation in front of him. He looks at the impact he wants to have. And his first impulse is I got to get a team together. I need to pull some people together to make this happen. And I just think if the Son of God needed a diverse team to tackle the problems of his day, what makes you think you don't? Like if God wasn't so arrogant to say like, you know what, I could probably do this by myself, but you know what, if I leverage other people, I can go so much further, faster. I can accomplish so much more because the reality of it is the problems facing us are diverse, and so the solution needs to be just as diverse. And when I say diverse, I mean diverse. Like you need people around you to partner with you that don't think or talk or act or look or solve problems like you do. And this is what Jesus does. He goes out and he begins to hand select people that, honestly, when you look at these people, you're like, you might have done it wrong. I wouldn't have put these people together, right? They don't seem like they go together. They're so diverse. It seems like, how are they even going to get along? How are you even going to accomplish anything with these people? And maybe you're thinking like, how diverse can they be? They're all Jews in the first century. But when you start to look at the profile of their personalities, and of their experiences and of their pasts, the way that they viewed life, they couldn't be more different. And so I want to do something this morning to give you some depth of context that hopefully will help you every time you come to look at the Gospels. I want to give you some insight into these 12 people that Jesus chose. And I've never done this before. I've never seen this done in church. We're going to do an experiment today and just talk through who these people are. And hopefully it works. And if not, you can just come back next week and it'll be better because we keep doing them every week. Sometimes you got to experiment though. But we're going to walk through these. And there's this famous painting that was done by Leonardo da Vinci of the Last Supper. And this is just to give you a frame of reference. This isn't a historical photograph. In fact, we know that there's a lot of details here that are incorrect. Namely that Jesus wasn't Swedish. He wasn't that pale. Probably didn't have a perm at the time, okay? So there's some things that are off, okay? That's real, right? We can do, but this will give you at least a frame of reference for who we're talking about, because this painting does do a decent job kind of giving us some insight into the different personalities of some of these people. So just for frame of reference, so you know we're on the same page, the person in the middle is Jesus, okay? I just want to be real clear, just so that we're all like, okay, I get it. I was wondering for a minute. But then the one, I thought it was the Father Time looking guy. But now that I get, and I see what you're saying about that perm, this is a bad choice. You needed a stylist. So the first disciple that comes on board with Jesus is a guy named Andrew. And Andrew, he was introduced to Jesus by John the Baptist, who was Jesus' cousin. He was also a prophet. And then Andrew, once he got introduced to Jesus, Andrew introduced Jesus to half of the other disciples. So he was really social. He was a connector. He knew all kinds of people. He paid attention to people. In fact, there's this famous story of Jesus feeding the 5,000, where this little boy comes forward with a few loaves and fish, and there's all this multitude of people that need to be fed. And it's actually Andrew who notices this kid, realizes what this kid has to offer, brings him to Jesus, and is like, I know it seems like I know other people have written it off. I think there's potential here. You can do something with this, can't you, Jesus? And this was Andrew. This is the way that he was. He had this intuitive ability to see and understand how people and their unique skills and perspectives could help the cause as a whole. This is how he functioned. And it's such a smart person to onboard first when you're starting a movement. So, Jesus, as it turns out, was really, really brilliant, okay? We're going to see that again and again. The second person that became a disciple, and the first person that Andrew introduces Jesus to is Peter, which makes sense because they're brothers, right? Peter was Andrew's older brother, and they were both fishermen. They were this tight-knit family of fishermen. And Peter was confident. He was assertive. He was also pretty impulsive, okay? He said and did things all the time without really thinking them through, right? Like he would just do stuff and people were like, you did not do any research on this, right? You didn't even look at the environment we're in. A lot of clues could have told you this is not going to end well, but you just went for it. You just put yourself out there, right? He learned things the hard way. Maybe some of you know people like that in your life. Don't point to them if they're here, but people that you're just like, they can't take anybody's word for anything. It's like, I got to get out there and I'm going to, you know what? You were right. You will burn yourself on the stove. That was not, when I did it, it was not, you were correct, right? But he took risks. He made a lot of mistakes. But at the end of the day, he was willing to say the thing that everybody else was thinking, but was too nervous to. He was willing to do the thing to follow God that other people kind of wanted to do, but just they didn't have the guts to. He was a leader. And Jesus leveraged him to go first and to lead the other disciples to where he needed them to go, to where they needed to go. Then you have John, son of Zebedee, right next to Jesus here. Somebody named their kid Zebedee. It's just a lost name, and it's magical. It's amazing. And he was another early recruit. He was also a fisherman. And so he and his brother James, we're going to talk about in a minute, would have rubbed shoulders with Andrew and Peter down on the docks. Their family was a little bit different than Peter's and Andrew's because they were a wealthier fishing family. They owned more of a fishing business as opposed to doing the actual work of a low-level fisherman. And, if we look at this guy's life, he was passionate, he was loyal. He also was kind of intolerant and a little bit exclusive. He had this personality where he tended to see everything as very black and white. Maybe you know people like this. There's no gray, there's no compromise. It's this or it's that. And, he was constantly calling people out on what he felt like they were doing wrong. There's story after story where it's just like a bunch of scenes of something happening and John being like, Jesus, so we got a sinner on our hands. They're breaking the rules. I know they're part of our team, but we should kick them off because they're not doing what you said the other day. I wrote it down, and it's exactly what you said, right? And the other disciples, I just imagine them time and time again are just rolling their eyes like, come on with this guy. Like, it's ridiculous, right? And this is the way that he was. He was also, kind of preoccupied with, position and proximity. He always wanted to be connected to or close to power, and it's not a coincidence that he is sitting in the seat of honor to the right of Jesus in this picture of the Last Supper. He wanted to be close. He wanted to be in that spot. He wanted to feel connected and loved. In fact, he had this nickname, John the Beloved, which awkwardly he gave to himself, and it only appears in books that he wrote. So that's kind of a little strange, right? I don't know if you ever had a friend that was like, hey, everyone's calling me this. And like, literally no one is calling you that. You're trying to get that started, and we're not going to do it. You're not going to be John the Beloved. You're John, son of Zebedee, okay? And we like that better because you're annoying sometimes. And when you're like picking on people, we're like, son of Zebedee. And we like it because it sounds like we're cursing, but we're not. It's fine. Jesus is cool with it, okay? So we're just going to go with that. Put your nickname in your own special book, okay? And he did. He really did that. Then there's James, the other son of Zebedee. And he was recruited alongside his brother John. And again, their family owned and operated this big fishing business. And because of that, their access to wealth, they helped them to fund and to provide transportation for Jesus' movement, which was an enormous gift. James and John also, they were given this nickname. They didn't give it to themselves. Other people gave them this nickname, the Sons of Thunder. What a great name. It feels like they're on a baseball team, like they're home run hitters, right? And they were given this nickname because they were super intense. And as an example of that, one time they begged Jesus to allow them to call down fire from heaven to burn some people alive because those people, they didn't think showed enough hospitality to the disciples. Jesus was like, is this a real question? Who are you people, right? Just like really intense, really all about it, right? Just like their mom. And I mean, that's fair because she was intense like that too. One time she lobbies Jesus to say like, I know you got some other disciples. Some of them are pretty good. Not that great. My boys are the best. You should make them your right and your left hand people. Like they should be the go-to people. And I think you should do it. And she's used to getting what she wants because she's kind of wealthy. She kind of throws her weight around a little bit. And Jesus' response is, how about you focus on trying to humble yourself and serve other people without needing accolades and let go of your desperate need for status? And they were just like, okay, you could have just said no, but that's cool. Whatever, however you want to do it. Guess you're the master teacher and all. I'll go cry in my hut now. But I guess they took this to heart because if you look at these key moments in Jesus' life, for the rest of his life, you have these people, these three specific people, Peter, James, and John, these two sons of thunder and Peter, who were really the ones who had the most trouble being humble and just doing things without getting noticed. And they were able to do that. And because of it, Jesus made them his inner circle. And they became his best friends. And they were pretty much inseparable. Then you have Thaddeus, another great name. Somebody, please, let's bring this back, all right? a name, he was the son of James, who is the son of Zebedee, right? So this is the son of one of the sons of thunder. So you have a father and a son duo in the disciples, which is interesting. And the name Thaddeus actually means breast. Okay, I'm not trying to get rated R weird in here. That's what it is, okay? And in this cultural context, it was a name that you would give to someone to imply that you want to keep them close to your heart at all times, right? And all the moms are like, oh, let's name our next born Thaddeus, right? This is sweet. And in fact, Thaddeus and the Sons of Thunder were credited for having attracted and recruited 70 additional of the early Jesus followers, partially due to their influence in their community because of their great wealth and their standing in that city, in that village. And although, Thaddeus, his father and his uncle really saw wealth as something that gave them the sense of exclusivity, Thaddeus saw it as a way to foster inclusivity. He saw their wealth as this tool that they could invest to make the Jesus movement accessible to all people everywhere, which he did. He lobbied for. And this means that, even though he was younger, which you wouldn't know it from this picture, right? You're like, man, he aged really quickly. The years were not kind, okay? He looks like Santa, and he's younger than some of these other guys here. It's crazy, right? But he was able to influence those who were older. In fact, his uncle later pens the most famous passage in Scripture. It's on usually a poster board at every football game ever, right? The John 3:16. God so loved the world that he gave his only son so that everyone, all people, right? Inclusivity, who believes won't perish but have eternal life. And that sounds, actually, when you know their personalities, it sounds less like John and more like Thaddeus. Because Thaddeus, though he was young, had a massive influence on really helping the other older disciples to understand that Jesus' movement was for everyone and getting that message out there. Then you have Matthew, right? The first gospel writer. He was a tax collector. And it basically means that he was a Jew hired by the Roman Empire to extort his own people. And so people didn't really like him, right? People usually don't like, traitors. And that's what they saw him as. And yet there's occasions where if you read through the Gospels, you'll notice that sometimes he's referred to as Levi. And that's because that was his given name. He grew up in this really religious family who always wanted him to be a priest. And, he didn't want to have anything to do with that. Like a lot of people who grew up in really strict religious environments, he rebelled against it. He didn't want anything to do with it. He went with this other name, Matthew, kind of pushed away from his religious upbringing and actually got a job with the Romans extorting the people that his parents were all about. And it was hurtful to the family. And yet he has this encounter with Jesus that he sees something in Jesus that he didn't ever experience through his religious upbringing. And it really threw him for a loop. And he was like, I think this is what life is about. And in fact, right afterwards, he's like, I want to throw a party and let everyone know that my life has changed. And so Jesus is like, yeah, invite all your friends. And I don't know who they thought was going to show up, but it says in the story that he brings all of these tax collectors and sinners and defunct Jews who didn't want to have anything to do with their upbringing too. And it was basically all of the people who had been excommunicated from the village just came to this guy's house, and then Jesus is there talking to them, which is hilarious. But it's also, it's incredibly poignant because after this point, Matthew devotes the rest of his life in service of really trying to reconnect Jews who had abandoned their faith to find new hope in Jesus. Then you have James, who's Matthew's younger brother, the son of Alphaeus. This is second James. And he was a nationalistic zealot, right? So he was a part of a group who wanted to violently overthrow the Roman government through guerrilla warfare. He was rebellious, he was patriotic, he was idealistic, he was nationalistic, not nationalistic for the Romans, but against the Romans for the nation of Israel, which had really been disassembled at this point. He was the exact opposite of his brother, right? Like a lot of families, he's like, yeah, if my older brother's going to be that, I'm going to do the other thing. It's interesting, too, if you notice in this picture, they're sitting on opposite sides of the room, like most siblings, right? It's like, yeah, he's got his friends, I've got mine. We split them up, 6 and 6. We're good, okay? Like, you do the thing over there. They were as different as two people could be. And yet Jesus recruits both of them at the same time, no doubt in hopes of reconciling both of them by leveraging their separate strengths in pursuit of a common cause. It's also speculated that, their mom was really good friends with Jesus' mom. And in fact, they might have actually been related to Jesus, these two brothers, Matthew and James. And in fact, when Jesus is declared an enemy of the state and he's executed publicly, it's actually their mom who takes care of Jesus' mom and his family because they were leaned into the family. Then there's Simon the Zealot, who was also a zealot. You can tell by the name, the Zealot, which is literally his last name. Interesting, right? And so he would have known James. And interestingly, they had spent their entire lives up to this point, really trying to make Israel great again. They got the hats and everything. And what their goal, how they were going to go about it, was they were going to force all the Romans out. Then they meet Jesus. And what happens, ironically, is they spend the rest of their lives trying to invite the Romans into the movement of Jesus. And the only reason why this movement was able to travel and go so far and wide and include so many different types of people was because of the elaborate network of roads that the Romans forced the Jews to build and maintain. So Jesus redeems this thing and leverages it for his purposes. And had Jesus given the zealots the revolution they wanted, the gospel would have actually just stayed in Jerusalem, right? And the road system would have gone away, and the Roman structure would have disappeared that enabled them to really do some of their best work. So he recruits these people, and he redirects their passion towards something that is redemptive for his cause. Then you have Philip, who was a really liberal Jew. He has a Greek name, he has a Greek background, he understood both cultures of the Hebrews and of the Greeks, and he understood both languages. He had a foot in both worlds, which actually really made him the best possible missionary. There's this story where he travels to Samaria, which typically did not embrace Jews. And yet these people, when he shows up, they're spellbound by him because of the way that he talks and kind of the way that he is. He just knew instinctively how to bridge the culture gap and captivate their attention and their imagination in a way they hadn't heard before. And in fact, it was the liberalism that the conservative Jews hated about him that ended up being the very thing that enabled him to relate to and reach the Greek audience that had already written off all of the Jewish people and their Messiah. Then you have Bartholomew, sometimes referred to as Nathaniel, because those names clearly go together. And he was brought to Jesus by Philip, his friend, and he saw himself as like a cosmopolitan progressive. Like he could almost come off at times as arrogant when you read the stories. And he had, he seemed kind of prejudiced, honestly, towards sheltered rural people from the types of small towns that he felt like he'd outgrown. And in fact, when Philip tells him about Jesus of Nazareth and is like, this guy is the one that's going to change the world, he's like, can anything good come from Nazareth? He's like, come on, I've been there. The small town people, no, right? There's no way that's going to happen. He seems like kind of pompous, but in reality, he's enormously insecure. He just wants to be liked, wants to fit in. At one point, Jesus calls him a genuine son of Israel, which is a prophecy in his life because it doesn't really represent who he's become. There's a sense of irony because he spent his entire life trying to run away from his religious roots. And also his best friend is Philip, which is like, he's so liberal, he's barely even a Jew, right? So it's ironic that he is saying like, you have this potential to really grab hold and understand who you really are and make peace with your past and go back to these people that you've written off and show them what it looks like to find something real. And he does. Then you have Thomas, who's often nicknamed Doubting Thomas. And he's kind of the Debbie Downer of the group. Let's just be real, right? He even here, it looks like he's doubting something right now. Look at his hand gestures. He's like, we shouldn't have come here. Why are we in this room? I don't feel good about it. Are they cleaning up afterwards? I feel like I saw a roach. I don't like this. The lighting is wrong. Nobody's going to be able to paint us. Why are we on the same side of the table? He's just got so many questions, this guy. So much pushback. He's anxious. He's kind of despondent. But if you look at the whole of his personality, really, he's a realist. He has this critical mind. He's very analytical. And when he asks questions, he's not searching for excuses not to believe. He's searching for evidence to back his beliefs. In fact, there's this scene, he gets credited with having always been the one who was like pushing back against what Jesus was trying to do. But there's actually several scenes where he's doing the opposite. He's trying to lobby everyone else to go the direction Jesus wants them to go. There's a scene in John chapter 11 where Jesus is like, hey, we should go to this town and spread the gospel there. And all the other people are like, we don't want to go there. If we go there, we're going to die. And Thomas is like, I think we should go, right? Which is puzzling for a few things. You're like, does he just have a death wish? He's like, yeah, let's go, let's die. Who cares, right? Or is he just being really courageous? No one knows. It's probably a little bit of both, right? But God used this aspect of him, like his practical way of thinking gave this movement an edge strategically. And then, of course, you have Judas Iscariot, who famously betrayed Jesus. Like Judas, like it's that you can't name your kid Judas anymore. Judas and Hitler. Like you can't give a kid those names. It's horrible, right? Which is sad because when he was given this name, it was a great name, right? Like Judas, he was named after Judas Maccabeus, who was this Jewish cult leader, like kind of cult hero, who was celebrated for having been brave enough throughout their history to do the thing that nobody else was brave enough to do in order to save his people. And a lot of scholars think that that's what Judas thought he was doing when he handed Jesus over to the Romans, that he thought like, no one else is brave enough to do this, so I'm gonna give Jesus an opportunity where the spotlight's on him, and I'm gonna turn him over, and then he'll shirk off the chains, and he'll be like, my revolution starts now, and then it's gonna be crazy, and I'm sure there's gonna be some hip hop music involved. It's gonna be amazing, and I'm gonna be the one that people were like, Judas, he did it again, the greatest name in history, and it kind of backfired. Did not go that way for him. And Jesus knew he was always going to be betrayed by Judas because he understood like his personality and maybe even his misunderstanding of Jesus' movement. But nobody else really knew because Judas, he fit in. He was well-liked, he was charismatic, he was politically connected. He seemed like a smart choice to navigate the complicated political and social terrain that the Jesus movement was going to have to overcome in order to really be something that affected and impacted the world. So you have these 12 people. Jesus recruits all of them from their community to serve in their community because he wants them to love where they live. But the question is this: why is Jesus under the impression that this combination of people is going to be able to work together and make a difference? Because there's a lot at stake here. Like Jesus stacks like the ability of this entire movement, the fate of his entire movement, on the prediction that these 12 people are going to be able to band together, work out their differences, and be able to change the world and ultimately save humanity. That's a lot, because when I look at the diverse nature of these people, I'm like, I don't know. I feel like it could go the other way. Like, I don't know. So why did Jesus tend to think that this was going to work? Because I think Jesus understood something that we often don't, that those who band together bond together. Those who band together bond together. And herein lies, I think, a big difference between their culture and our culture. These people at this time in history were motivated by this desire to commit to and invest in a cause, which I would define as, something to devote yourself to that's bigger than you. And I think it could be argued that in our culture, we're maybe more motivated or driven by the desire to experience community, which is a sense that you belong with and are deeply connected to other people. But the reality of it is, these two things are interconnected. And we tend to think in our culture, like, once I find my people, then I'll lock in and go after a cause. But Jesus understood that if you commit to and contribute to a cause, the people you partner with, despite how different you all might be, will become your community. Like, oftentimes we've got the order backwards. In other words, if you're waiting until you feel completely at home and completely secure and completely like there's no more risk and like you found all of your besties before you get involved and serve and link arms with other people to do something significant that's bigger than you for someone other than you, Jesus and his disciples would say to you, what are you waiting for? You've got it backward. You'll find the camaraderie you're looking for after you begin to invest in the cause. Because the truth is, the best way to connect with people in here is to collectively serve the community out there. Because part of meeting your individual needs is partnering with others to meet our communal needs. This is how humans were designed to function. And I get that you, like most in our culture, are well aware that you have a sense of disconnection, that you don't know where you fit, that you don't know where you belong, that you don't know who your people are. And I'm just telling you that what Jesus understood is all of these people in this story had that same sense about their own lives. And he didn't try and make them make friends first. He said, listen, this is the cause. And if you make yourself about this thing, if you invest, if you sacrifice on behalf of it, you will find your people. They'll become your people. And the reality of it is, the individual needs that you have in your own life, many of them will only be found after you partner with others to meet our communal needs. Have you ever talked to somebody who went out and they did something to serve other people, and while it exhausted them and they had to exert themselves, and while there was some fear involved in like whether or not like they were going to fit or was going to work, they came back and they're like, I feel energized. I feel good. I feel connected. I feel like I like those people. And then you're like, who were they? And they start describing you. You're like, you like those people? They seem super different than you. And you're like, there's something weird about that, right? Because those who band together, bond together. It's the way in which we're made. Maybe you're thinking like, I hear what you're saying, but it's like, I don't know. I just feel like if I sign up to serve somewhere, like they're not going to get me. I'm like, I look at the people that are serving and I'm just like, I'm not like those people. Like, I'm not their kind of people. They're not my kind of people. Nothing against them. It's just like, we're just different, right? And it's just, I feel like our personalities are going to clash. And, it's like, right now they're like, yeah, we like you, we need you. But it's like, once they find out what I can do, they're going to be like, yeah, we don't need that. That's the one skill that we find useless, right? I feel like that, right? Or like I feel like they're gonna be like, yeah, we like you now, but like once they get to know me and they get to know like what I think about certain things and what I do on the weekends sometimes, and like they know more about my life, like they're not gonna like me, they're not gonna want me, and that's what's holding me back. And I gotta tell you, those fears really are valid. You're not crazy for thinking those things. I mean, I can imagine that like virtually every disciple had those same thoughts at some point when Jesus is trying to pull them on board. I mean, except Peter. That guy was almost too into it from the beginning. You know what I mean? Like, but the other ones, right? And those things might happen to you. Not all of those fears are completely irrational. And the reason why some of you have them is because you've been in other environments and had other experiences that hurt you. And it's hard to put yourself out there again. And although it is possible that things could happen here, I know so many of the staff and the leaders and the people that serve here, I just think it's very improbable that people would treat you that way in this environment. But what else is true is that there is no reward of connection without the risk of rejection. And I know you are nervous to put yourself out there, and I know you are fearful about what it could mean, but the connection you're looking for, you have to risk rejection to get there. Every intimate, meaningful relationship that you found yourself in the course of your life came with some risk, but the reward was worth it. And I would argue that the same is true here. I'm so glad that the disciples didn't let all the same fears that you and I have prevent them from stepping forward and serving, because we're all benefiting from their bravery. And not only did their boldness benefit us, but it benefited them too, because these 12 people who couldn't be more different, when you look at their stories and their past and their experiences, they ended up becoming best friends. Committing to serve the cause was where they found their sense of community. And I'm telling you, the same thing will happen for you. And when I look at this list of all these different quirky people that Jesus picked 2,000 years ago, I just think we needed every single one. Because without this diverse group of people, there's a whole bunch of people that wouldn't have been reached. We needed them, and we need you too. We need you because the reality that was true then is true now. Different people arrive at truth differently, and diverse problems require diverse solutions. I hate to admit it, but I need my son's soccer coach in my son's life. Because the reality of it is that there are going to be certain lessons that he is not able to learn outside of that influence. I mean, the guy gets too much credit, that's for sure. But still, There's just certain breakthroughs that my kids can't have without him. And there are certain breakthroughs that the people that are going to end up in this place cannot have without you. Because there are a diverse group of people that are desperate for the same sense of community that you have found, and they will only find it because you are serving the cause. And in fact, you serving the cause is the key to you finding the community that you need in your life. Because the two always go hand in hand. We need you. This city needs you. This community needs you. And I just wonder, what if we decided to prioritize practically serving the needs of our community above our own fears? Because Jesus believed if he could get a group of diverse people to set their fears aside long enough to serve the people in front of them on a consistent basis, that the world could be turned upside down, that the world could be saved. Why wouldn't that be true of our city? Why wouldn't that be true of this community? It is. And in fact, there are people in this room, maybe you are here, not because you deeply connected with something I stood up and said or did, or you're like, I don't know about this guy with this weird picnic shirt and the mustache. I don't know what's going on. The way he talks. What is this even a real sermon? I don't like the JP guy. He dances so much. There's haze. It looks like someone's vaping backstage. I don't know what's going on. Is this a real church? But what you connected with was that somebody greeted you, somebody hugged you, somebody got up early and put out donuts, somebody swept the patio, somebody hung signs so that you knew where this church was, somebody went to a coffee shop and bought you a drink and told you that you were loved, somebody went out and served something that affected your kid that enabled you to say, well, what about that place? Somebody, when you checked your kids in, they took care of them. And your kid, for the first time in their life, said, when can we come back to church? And you're like, church, are you saying the right word? What's happening right now? And you were overwhelmed because somebody cared enough to invest, because somebody honored you, somebody paid attention to you. Not everybody's going to connect with all my words, not everybody's going to connect with all the songs or the things we do on the stage, but it doesn't matter. Just like Jesus needed disciples, we need you. You have a purpose to play here. And that's what we want to invite you into today. Not only do we want to see you get out and serve in our community, we want to see you serve right here on this campus. And on your chair when you came in, there's this card that says, Find Your Fit. And this is my challenge for you today. I want you to fill this out. I want you to bubble in a couple different things that you are interested in. This isn't you signing up or cementing in that you're going to do these things forever. This is I'm interested in maybe doing that. What does that mean? I want somebody to call me and tell me what that's about. There's stuff in every single area here. Pick a couple things, and you're going to find your fit. And you're going to narrow it down. Maybe you'll do a couple things. Maybe you'll just do one thing. That's fine. Nobody's going to shame you because you picked a different ministry after they called you, okay? We just want you to find somewhere. And we also, on the backside, just fill out your name, your cell number, and your email. We're not going to try and sell you anything. We're not going to abuse the privilege of having that information. We just want to give you what the next step is in your journey so that you can connect with one of these teams. Because I think you finding where you fit, I think you engaging in service, I think you deciding to get on board with the cause and not just to come in and sit through a service, but actually serve this community at large. I think it's going to help you in a way that you can't even comprehend until you get involved and do it. And as we ramp up to Easter, if our last few years have been a projection of what to expect for this year, we will double and triple in size on Easter. And it means it takes a lot of people to really take care of the people that are going to be flooding into this place. And I hope that a lot of those people stick around, and they need you. We need you. And you need it. I would argue that you need this more than we need you. It's not just about filling a role. It's about you finding your fit. Because the community that you're going to be gifted with is what you're desperate for. And I want to pray that into your life today. I want you to fill this out in just a few moments. We're going to give you a chance as we dismiss to drop it in the buckets that the ushers have at the back of the room. But I want to pray for you first. Would you bow your head and just close your eyes just to provide some focus in your heart in this moment as I pray for you. And before I pray for all of us, I want to pray for a few of you specifically. And as your heads are bowed, maybe you're in a place where you're like, I'm getting to a place in my life where I realize I can't do it on my own. I don't have it all figured out. All the problems and issues that I face, I can't solve by myself. And when you look at the disciples, the first step was to simply say yes and open their hearts and lives to Jesus. And the second step was to serve and follow him. And maybe today you've not taken that first step. And we call it saying yes here at South Hills. And I want to give you that chance today to simply pray to open your heart to say, God, I believe that you love me, that you see me, that you created me, that you want me. God, I want to open myself up to your forgiveness, to your direction in my life. And as I take this first step, I want you to lead me to the life that will be full and purposeful and meaningful. And if that's you, would you just boldly, while no one's looking around, just slip a hand up. I want to pray for you specifically, and I want to see who I'm praying for this morning. And I want to pray for all of us. Awesome. I see a lot of hands in the room. God, you see all these hands raised. More importantly, you see their hearts, every single person in this room, and you know the sense that they have inside of themselves of, there's got to be something more. There's got to be something better in life. God, I pray that moment of humility and desperation to open themselves up to you would be the moment in which you rush in with your love, with your grace, with your mercy, and you gift them with the fresh start that they're in need of. God, begin to rearrange how they see reality. And God, may you orient their life around you, around your wisdom, around your way. God, may today be the beginning of a brand new life for them. And God, for those of us who may have said yes before, God, we want to be bold enough to take the next step, to follow you into what is next, to what is after. And God, that we would chase you into a place of serving a cause, not just out at a nonprofit connected around here, but God, in our home turf right here on this campus, that we would be the face and the smile and the behind the scenes work that makes this place the perfect place for imperfect people. Somebody else did it for us, and now it's our turn to pay it forward. And God, I pray that as we commit and serve into this cause, that you would give us a deep sense of community, of connectedness, and that we would find some of our best, deepest friendships by simply agreeing to serve. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.